They stand outside on the steps watching as the men find their loved ones. Ada spots Robin before Moira. There he is! Robin looks over at the top of the steps and sees Moira. He cuts through the crowd and steps up the steps to her. It had been just over 3 years since they laid eyes on each other. He picks her up and spins her around before placing her down and planting a kiss on her lips. Ada watched in delight at their reunion. I've been looking forward to that for the last 3 years, he says, smiling. Moira blushes, speechless. It's good to see you too. Where's Will? He asks. We're not exactly sure, answers Ada. A lot has changed since you've been gone, Robin. The king is dead, informs Moira. What? Asks Robin, surprised. They say he was wounded in battle and died of infection. John is now the new king of Nottingham, she says. Ada offers to pick up a few of Moira's chores so she and Robin could walk the city streets and catch up on lost time. The whole time the sheriff followed in the background. Have you seen my father? Asks Robin. No, I had only seen him once in the marketplace, after you left while out fetching something for milady. Many of the farms and lands just beyond the castle grounds have been seized by the king and sheriff. Many of the people have fallen ill or moved to new towns seeking refuge. You look as beautiful as I remember, he says, trying to move on to more cheerful conversation. He takes her hand in his and they walk. The gesture made Moira feel awkward at first, until he smiled charmingly. So how many other girls received love letters from you, Mr. Locksley? Asked Moira, in a playful tone. I lost count after I wrote you, he jokes. Moira swats his shoulder. You may look mature with your silly excuse of a beard, but you've hardly matured. I think I look quite dapper with facial hair, he says, rubbing the light scruff on his face. He stops in the square and takes both her hands in his. Good day, my lad, and who might you be? Says the sheriff, deciding to intrude. Moira was enjoying the young man's company too much. Robin, of Locksley, he says, shaking the sheriff's hand. Robin of Locksley. Well, now, you wouldn't be the son of Malcolm of Locksley, would you? Aye, that be my father, he confirms. Well, I hate to have to do this to you, seeing as how you just served your kingdom, but you're under arrest, he says, grabbing Robin's arm. Excuse me, asks a confused Robin. Wait just a moment, Sheriff. Under what grounds? Questions Moira. Why, he hasn't paid taxes on his land in almost a year. He has been fighting a war alongside our king. You can't possibly expect him to. I expect the laws to be followed, and when they are not, punishment shall be bestowed. The sheriff cuffs Robin and walks him away. Don't worry, I'll be all right, assures Robin from over his shoulder. I'm not sure how you're expecting me to pay you your taxes when I'm in here, smirks Robin as the sheriff shackles his cuffs to the wall of the dungeon. I'm not worried about you paying your taxes, my dear boy, replies the sheriff. Your property was seized by the king following your father's death. Robin looks intensely at the sheriff. What do you mean, my father's death? Your father was found dead in his home this past winter. Robin stares blankly, trying to comprehend the news. Now, if you don't mind, I must go comfort Moira. I'm sure all this has been quite upsetting to her, he says with a tone that leaves Robin questioning the validity of his concern for her. After the sheriff took Robin away, Moira turned to the only place she felt she could for peace, the church, just inside the castle walls. Friar Tuck found her in the nave of the base of the church near the cross in despair. His stout frame wobbled down the aisle towards her, and he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. What weighs your soul, my child? He asks. Too many burdens, she replies. I am here for you. There is so much corruption. People who are starving and dying in the streets. The false king as he sits comfortably on his throne. My lady on her last breath. A man imprisoned after serving his kingdom. We must be brave in these hard times. God will show us the way, he advises while helping her to her feet. Let us pray. It isn't long before the sheriff comes walking in, the jingle of his keys sending a chill up Moira's spine. Good evening, Friar, he says pleasantly. Sheriff, what might I do for you today? Inquires the friar. I'm just doing my rounds. He glances at the stained glass windows as he approaches. It would seem the church has yet to pay its taxes. Because the church does not abide by the laws of man. We do God's work. That may be true, but this church resides on castle grounds and is therefore required to pay its fair share in taxes, as requested by King John. King John is... starts an angry Moira. Sheriff, interrupts the friar, before Moira can say something that she would regret. Why don't we discuss this matter in a private setting? The two men head towards the friar's private quarters. The sheriff grabs Moira's arm gently as they pass. I will require your services in my quarter tonight, after dinner. She yanks her arm away and heads to the castle to check on the queen. When she gets to her chamber, Ada is outside the door crying, and her heart sinks deeper into her gut the closer she gets. What is it? She asks. A doctor walks out of the room, adjusting his glasses before she could answer. The queen has passed. Quietly in her sleep, he states. Moira pushes the doctor aside as she enters the room. She slowly approaches the bed and kneels beside the queen. Her pallid hand was cold to Moira's touch. Ada followed in behind her and placed a supportive hand on her as she cried. That night, the queen's body was taken to the church, where Moira prepped her for the funeral. She combed her long gray hair down over her shoulders and placed a crown of wildflowers across her head. Rest peacefully, milady. Join your king once more. She kisses her cold, stiff cheek one last time. Robin was in the dungeon looking at the moon through the small set of bars. When the troops learned they would be returning home, seeing Moira was the first thing he had planned to do. It had been 3 years, and his worst fear was coming home to find her wed to another man. Instead, she had caught the eye of an unscrupulous sheriff whom he was sure would stop at nothing to have her. Lost in his thoughts, he catches sight of a stone falling out of the wall to his right, and then another, and another. Robin, calls a voice. Will? Says Robin, squinting at the figure emerging from the hole. Shh. Yes, I've come to break you out. How did you know I was even in here? Never mind that, he says, removing a lockpick. He quickly pops the lock on Robin's shackles, and they head out through the hole, replacing the bricks behind them. Where are we going? Asks Robin. You'll see. They come out through a tunnel on the outside of the rear castle wall, where 2 men were waiting with horses. One was about average height, with a scar running down his face across his left eye. His shaggy brown hair was pulled out of his face in a tie, and he looked to be in good physical shape. The other was tall, towering over them, with broad shoulders, heavily sculpted arms, and a bald head. He was ghost-like and looked on very sternly. Robin? Asked the man with the scar. Yes, I'm Robin. Who the hell are you? I'm Little John, and this is Duncan. We have work to be done. He hands him the reins to a horse. Robin uneasily takes them. The men mount up and head off towards the tree line. Moira could feel the sheriff's eyes linger over her as she stood in the dining room and assisted with dinner. The dismissal of many of the castle's staff meant more duties for those who remained. After dinner, Moira hurries to her servant quarters and starts packing a small bag. Ada walks in just as she grabs the last of her things. "What do you think you're doing?" she asks in a loud whisper. "I'm getting out of here. I can't stay any longer." "Where will you go? What about Robin?" "Ada, please." Moira pauses for a moment to think. "I haven't much time. It's the sheriff. He's set his sights on me, and if I don't leave now, I'm afraid I won't have another chance." She nods and helps Moira sneak out of the castle into the city just outside the wall. "Please, take care of yourself," pleads Ada. "And you do the same." The two embrace each other tightly before she heads out into the streets and disappears into the darkness. In the 20 years they had known each other, it was the first time they had been apart. Moira was sure if she were to stay and fight the sheriff's advances, he would use Ada as leverage to get what he wanted from her. After a few hours, Robin and his rescuers reach their encampment. "Welcome to Sherwood," says Little John as they dismount from their horses. Robin looks around at the quaint little village of people. There were huts built at the base of trees as well as treetop quarters. Several children run around playing with wooden swords. "Are you the resistance?" asks Robin. "We are the closest thing our people have to hope," says Will. A small group of men walk over, carrying bags, and drop them at the feet of Little John. "A gift from His Highness and the King of France," says one of the men. Robin looks in the bag and finds food and gold. "You've stolen from our king?" he questions the men. "He's not our king. King Richard would never let his people go on starving and dying in the streets," states Little John. "He takes from the people and holds his riches, selling goods to other kingdoms. And his sheriff collects his own set of taxes, leaving nothing for the people. So we steal, and we give what we steal to those in need. But right now, we need some help. And Will thinks you're the one for the task." The next morning, the sheriff is notified of Robin's escape and storms off to find Moira. He enters the servant quarters shared by her and Ada to find her absent. "Where is she?" he yells. I don't know, sir," says Ada meekly. The sheriff storms out of the room and down the hall, fuming. He grabs a messenger by his collar at the castle entrance and tells him to put out posters for Robin, offering 40 shillings for his whereabouts. The look of anger on the sheriff's face was all the messenger needed to understand the importance of his request, and he stumbled down the hall to start immediately. Moira tried her best to blend in on the streets. She had very little for money, and no one whom she could turn to for help. There was only one person she felt she could trust, the friar. She climbed through a low-bearing window of the church and dropped down behind the altar. Quietly, she headed down a narrow hall to the friar's chambers and knocked. "Come in," he answers. She opens the door, covered in a heavy shroud, carrying a walking stick, and closes it behind her. "How may I help you, child of God?" he asks. She pulls back the hood and shroud to reveal herself. "Moira? Where have you been? The sheriff has been looking all over for you." "I'll bet he has. I could not stay here another minute. Milady is gone, and I fear he will soon be after me. I need your help, friar. A dear friend of mine has been imprisoned, wrongfully, and I fear the sheriff will see to it he is hanged." "Who is this friend of yours, my dear?" asked the concerned friar. "Robin of Locksley." "Well, you can rest easy, child. He escaped the dungeon last night. The sheriff has put a bounty on him." Moira breathes a sigh of relief. "When will services be held for the Queen?" "This evening. There is to be a procession, followed by a ceremony here. I am not sure it is wise for you to attend. The sheriff will no doubt be expecting you to be in attendance. She will be taken down to the catacombs just after sundown. You were much more than a chambermaid to her, he says, opening a small drawer in the desk that sat by a window, and pulled out a small box. She called me to her chambers shortly before her passing. She asked me to give this to you. Moira opened the box to find a hairpin and 2 candies. The hairpin had belonged to the queen, and she had always adored it. The 2 candies were her favorites. The king would often travel to Germany and bring back gifts for the queen. Her favorite was the Belgian chocolates. She would often share one with Moira at the end of the night. Moira wiped a tear away. The main church door closes, and the sound of the sheriff's keys echoes into the nave of the church. You must leave at once before you are found, says the friar. He slides a tall painting to the side and reveals a path leading into the main church. This will lead you to the tapestry behind the altar. I take it you can find your way out the same way you got in. Take care, my child. Moira shuffles down the narrow path, and the friar replaces the painting just before the sheriff enters. She walks the streets of the marketplace, trying to figure out what she is trying to achieve. There were almost a dozen misplaced families lining the streets and alleyways, begging for anything that could be spared. She watched as a woman nursed her child while 2 more lay beside her. Moira spots a poster that she previously did not notice. On it is a rough sketch of Robin, offering 40 shillings to anyone who knows his whereabouts. She tears down the poster and heads towards the town square in the marketplace. She steals a writer's pouch off an unsuspecting town crier as he browsed the shops. She headed near the castle wall and writes a note to Ada, telling her she is well and instructing her to leave the kitchen door unlocked that night after everyone has gone to bed. A couple of children run by, and Moira takes one by the arm. Hey, how would you like to earn a coin? She asks. What have I got to do? Asked the little boy. Take this letter and hide it in the king's chicken coop. In the chickens? He asks, confused. Moira hands the boy a pence, and he takes the note without any more questions. She watches as he enters the castle gates hidden within a group of visitors. Once he returns from the castle grounds, she goes on her way. That night she sneaks over the wall of the castle and towards the kitchen, avoiding the patrol of guards. Quietly she enters the kitchen and grabs the potato sack. She quickly throws food into the sack and heads over to the pantry. She's taken surprise when she finds Ada hiding in there waiting for her. For Christ's sakes, Ada, you're going to give me a heart attack, says Moira, taking a step back as her heart races. What are you doing? You're going to get yourself caught sneaking around here. Ada, you should see them. So many people in the streets are starving. I need to get some of this to them. Ada watches as Moira packs food into another bag. And how exactly are you planning on getting this over the wall? I suspect you didn't just walk in through the gate knowing the sheriff is looking for you. Moira pauses, realizing she hadn't thought that far ahead. I'll take a horse. Bloody hell, Moira! The king will have you hanged. Shh! Keep your voice down. I'll need a distraction to get the guards away from the stables. She decides as she peers out of the kitchen door at the guards on watch. Ada looks at Moira uneasily and crosses her arms. I'll do it. No, Ada, you're going to get yourself in trouble, protests Moira. Yeah, well, I'd rather take a few lashings than watch you dangle from a noose while the birds peck out your eyes, she points out. Moira reluctantly agrees and hides just outside the door of the kitchen as Ada knocks down a huge pile of pots and pans above the stove. The guards standing watch by the stable hears the noise and go to investigate. Moira sneaks into the stables and loads the 2 bags onto a horse. The blacksmith's shed was unguarded and only a short distance away from the stables. She sneaks along the wall to peek inside and sees a small sheath of throwing knives. Moira wraps them up and ties them to her belt on her dress before heading back to the stables. She opens the door to all the horses before mounting hers and sending them all stampeding through the courtyard. The guards who enter the kitchen come running out at the sound of the neighs and hooves trampling through the courtyard. A pair on patrol by the castle gates quickly try to stop the horses from escaping, allowing her to steer her horse through them. As her horse races down the street, she cuts open the sacks, littering the food into the marketplace. The commotion woke many of the vagrants sleeping in the streets who were pained by empty stomachs. They spared no time in grabbing what they could before retreating back into their places of hiding. She soon hears the trumpets go off, signaling a breach in the castle, but makes it out of the city gates before the soldiers could close it. She heads towards Locksley and hopes that Robin is there.